So Luke, 2020, pretty interesting year, but the good news is I'm sure that 2021 will be much better.
Yeah, that's how it works, doesn't it? As soon as a new year happens, things just get magically better. But of course, the reality is, I think, well, what I've learned anyway living on this world is things will pretty much stay the same, but just keep getting that bit worse. And I don't think that's going to change in 2021, unfortunately. But regardless of how bad things are or how bad things are going to get, we can still make predictions, Michael, on 2021. And that is what we are going to be doing today. We are going to be making predictions on what's going to happen on both sides of the Atlantic, in UK politics and the United States politics. So, Michael, are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, good to see you're very enthusiastic about this. Let's start with the United States. I think we have to because we are recording this the day before Joe Biden is inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States of America. And obviously that's a pretty big occasion. The Democrats have got control of the Senate. They won both Senate seats in Georgia. Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock will be heading to the Senate, meaning it's 50-50, and meaning that Kamala Harris, the new vice president, will be the deciding vote in the Senate. And the question now is, Michael, how much will things change because Joe Biden is in the White House compared to Donald Trump? How much will things change now that the Democrats control all three sections of legislative government, the Senate, the House, and the presidency? I'm going to make a prediction, Michael, that things will not be that much different. I thought there would maybe be some stuff like $2,000 stimulus checks, because of course that's what Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock campaigned on quite a lot in the Georgia Senate runoffs, and there'll be little changes around the edges here and there, maybe on student debt, for instance, 10,000 being cancelled, which isn't nothing, but it's not really as big as it can get. But I don't think there'll be a massive change compared to a Republican-controlled Senate. I mean, you can see this with the fact that already the $2,000 checks have apparently been watered down to $1,400 checks.
What they should have done is started off saying that there would be $1 million stimulus checks, and then by the time it got watered down and compromised, then it would have been a $2,000 stimulus check. You always start with more than you want. That's how compromise works. But of course, the Democrats wouldn't understand that because they're too gosh darn honourable. And I think, yeah, that's the thing. I agree with you that not much is going to change. The big question is, to what extent is it because the Democrats are going to be doing their standard compromising thing where they try and reach out an olive branch even after the Republicans fought tooth and nail to be the most obstructionist government ever? Or is it because of the whole standard corporate overlord stuff, or is it a sophisticated combination of both of those things? Ultimately, yeah, I agree with you that it doesn't seem likely, and it hasn't seemed likely since Joe Biden became the nominee, that we were likely to see sweeping progressive changes. Obviously, there is still an opportunity for grassroots activism from the progressive left, which I think would have been harder to achieve in other scenarios. But obviously, suffice it to say, the floodgates are not open for the progressive left.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the case. And, well, we have seen talks concerning the minimum wage being increased to $15 an hour through reconciliation, or maybe removing the Trump tax cuts. But I don't think Biden and the Democrats are going to do those things. They are going to use the excuse that, well, it's 50-50, we've basically got a tied Senate, and, it's very difficult to make these sweeping changes when, the American people want unity. That'll be an excuse that is trotted out over and over again. So, yeah, I think that ultimately things will get a bit better with the Democrats in control of all three legislative branches, but ultimately I don't see a massive change. But I'm happy to be proven wrong on that front. But let's talk about now, Michael, the coverage of Joe Biden in the media. And this is quite interesting because unlike the previous two presidents, I think the media will probably ignore Biden quite a lot for two reasons. Number one, Biden clearly has, I guess the technical term is a mushy brain. I think that's what it's called. He is prone to have random weird outbursts, like he had recently, actually, at the NAACP leader, when he said he was the only white boy who was running for president because of what happened in Charlottesville. He was the only white boy standing up for racism. Just a bizarre thing that just was not covered in the media at all. And that's part of the reason why I think he will be ignored altogether. But another reason why he's going to be ignored, Biden is boring. He is an old white guy. He's not like Obama or like Trump. I mean, Trump's an old white guy, but, Trump had other appeals. So the question is, who will be covered in this administration? And the answer is Kamala Harris. She will be focused on by the media more than any other vice president probably ever, even more than Dick Cheney in the 2000s. This is because, of course, Kamala Harris is a black woman. She's the first female vice president, and she is the first POC vice president as well. I think you can see evidence of this from the Time Person of the Year, which came out a few weeks ago. On the cover of the magazine, Joe Biden was there with Kamala Harris. As you can tell, Michael, Person of the Year just usually means one person. And previous presidents like Obama and Trump, it's just been them. It hasn't been their vice president alongside them. But for some reason, Kamala Harris was alongside Joe Biden, even though she wasn't really involved in that campaign at all, really. Like, she gave some rallies, but, I remember actually the night that Biden won, and there was this CNN commentator who was saying, like, oh yes, Kamala Harris winning, it's just because she's ousting a white supremacist president. And I was like, oh yeah, Kamala Harris is going to be vice president now. She's on this ticket. She was a complete afterthought, but now because she's this woman who's a person of color, she will be of prominent focus in the media because of that. What do you think, Michael?
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, on all, I guess, 3 counts really, which is that Joe Biden, I think he's not as fun to make fun of. I guess it's not just that he's got a mushy brain, but also that I guess he presents himself as kind of America's granddad, and nobody bullies their granddad, do they? So that's part of it. And then obviously, yes, I agree with you that he's not a particularly interesting in terms of his policies. He's pretty much exactly middle of the road on everything, even more so than Obama, because Obama ran on hope and change. Joe Biden ran on bringing things back to how they used to be, and obviously he won with the white suburban moderates, the most boring demographic there is. And on the subject of demographics, yes, in terms of identity, he is really, really boring, and I agree with you that he's just a white male. And certainly, as I have recently pointed out in my own capacity, America, the progressive left in America, is more focused on identity in a way that we the Brits aren't. Obviously, the opportunity to celebrate a powerful woman of color who SNL love, defeating that Donald Trump white supremacist who SNL hates. It's just going to be too much for them to not say everything about it and put her as the main focus. And yeah, I do think that there is going to be an idea, almost, obviously you mentioned Dick Cheney. The funny thing is with Dick Cheney, it was appropriate to say that he was really the guy behind the curtains pulling the strings. I'm expecting you're going to see that kind of narrative from the Conservatives, saying like she's pulling the strings in an evil way. Yes. And probably from the Liberals, it's going to be a case of she's pulling the strings. They probably wouldn't use that term, but she's pulling the strings in like a positive way, and she's doing all this great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. That was what I was going to say next, actually, that it's not just going to be the liberal mainstream media, I guess you could say, in the United States. This is going to be right-wing media as well, like Fox News, who are going to prop up the prominence of Kamala Harris, because simply put, it's easy to scare people with Kamala Harris compared to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's this old white guy, he's a known capacity, while Kamala Harris is relatively new to the political scene. She's only been around for like 4 years, and she's black, and she's a woman of colour. Like, she's gonna be target number 1 for Fox News to really rile up their base. So yeah, that's gonna be a definite prediction that Kamala Harris will have a bigger role, just not maybe in the administration, but in the media coverage of the administration than anybody would normally have, given her position. So now, Michael, let's move on to Donald Trump. Here's the thing with Trump. It's quite difficult to make predictions about him because, of course, he's been banned from Twitter. So who knows what he's going to do. But I think one thing that he will definitely do is appear on TV a lot. But I don't think he'll have like a Trump TV kind of thing. It's not really necessary. I think what will probably happen is he'll have regularly scheduled interviews with OAN or Newsmax, but that will be that, and that's how he can reach people on Twitter. Like, Newsmax will post a clip of Donald Trump talking on Twitter, and it could go viral on Twitter, and Trump will tell all his followers at rallies, "Here, go follow Newsmax on Twitter," for instance. That's how he can still get his message out there, I think. I'd really like to see, though, a bit of an offside, but I'd really like to see a reality TV show with Donald Trump. The premise would be he's picking a Republican candidate for mayor of a small town, for instance. The candidates have to give speeches about what it means to be an American, and then Trump picks the best speech and he makes them mayor. I think that's a really good idea. And, if anyone's interested in making that, I'll be in touch for sure. But yeah, what do you think, Michael?
Who would be? I think there should be some other judges. Can you think of someone else who would like to be a judge?
It'll be like The Apprentice. That's the point.
Oh, just okay. I was kind of thinking like in my head, I was thinking more like X Factor.
No. It'll be The Apprentice. Yeah.
No, yeah. I kind of agree with you. I think ultimately Donald Trump, he's a bit of a grifter, and I kind of because of that. I know that's really shocking, but I don't see him doing something that involves a real vision or too much effort or any real risk. And starting his own TV show are all of those things. Whereas you think by contrast, him appearing on other people's TV shows, that's his dream, because he gets to, talk shit just like he likes to do on Twitter. He can potentially try and garner support from his gullible followers. And ultimately, he doesn't have to take on any risk. He doesn't really have to do any effort. Doesn't have to do any like research or anything or find any contacts to do interviews with. He just has to go on there and spout whatever comes to his mind. And yeah, so it's basically a win-win as far as everyone's concerned. And yeah, basically that's why I don't see him starting a TV network, because it's not in his style to actually put in any effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on now, Michael, to talking about the consequences for Trump.
Because 3 words. Lock him up.
Yes, he could get locked up. Who knows? Well, let's talk about impeachment first. Will he get impeached? It is possible even after he leaves office to get impeached. And this all depends, I think, on whether Mitch McConnell decides he can turn out the Republican base without Trump. I think if he thinks he needs Donald Trump to have Republicans win seats, win elections, he won't impeach Trump. He'll keep Trump on side and possibly have him run in 2024. But if McConnell decides the Republican Party needs to move on without Trump, and crucially can move on without Trump, then I think he'll pull the plug. But that's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks. My prediction on that is probably no. Probably no on that. That's what I'm going to say. What do you think on that, Michael?
No, yeah, ultimately I agree. I mean, it was... I guess it was just a symbolic thing in the first place, because obviously he's gone now. He's lost the election. I mean he will go, and therefore it's kind of just a case of trying to make a point, I guess. And yeah, I don't see the Republicans feeling any need to support that, and certainly if it's in their interests to keep him around or to not have him face any consequences for his actions, yeah, they're not going to vote for that.
Yeah,
and obviously I guess not too many of them would need to, but. Yeah. I don't see. You might get kind of what they did the last time, which is as many people as can afford to make a principled stand against him will, but not enough to actually have effect. Yeah. That's what I did last time, right?
They only need 17, basically. They only need 17 senators out of the 50. And because, of course, if he gets impeached, then he can't run again in 2024. He's not allowed to. So that's the question for Mitch McConnell. Well, he obviously doesn't like Trump, but the question is, can he move on from Trump? And so, yeah, I think ultimately the answer will be no. There's no one quite like Donald Trump. That has been made clear in the past few years. So I don't think Mitch McConnell will remove that option for power. I don't think that will happen. Let's talk about his prosecution now, because that's a different matter from impeachment. And I do not think this is going to happen either. I think the Democrats will say we have to move on. They don't want to do it. Liberals have finally paid attention to all the awful stuff that US presidents can do when Trump was in charge, and I think it's quite concerning for the Democrats there. I think the Democratic Party will want people to forget about all the awful stuff Donald Trump did when he was in power quite quickly, notwithstanding the Capitol, because that's a separate thing. I'm talking about all the stuff he was actually doing while he was president. Because if he can go to jail for something that he did as president, notwithstanding the Capitol stuff, then a whole lot of people in Washington could go to jail as well. I remember Hakeem Jeffries, who's an extremely centrist New York politician, said something similar the other day. They want to move on. I think they will say impeachment is enough, basically. We impeached him, that's all we need to do. This was my take before the Capitol attack, and yeah, I just don't think the Capitol attack will have changed anything in that regard. So what do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it would establish, I guess, what's called a dangerous precedent, because obviously, like you say, plenty of politicians have done dodgy things. And also, I think Democrats, they love the system. Liberals in general, I guess, are defined by their support for the idea that systems and processes are the best way to affect meaningful and proper and morally righteous change. And obviously, if somebody who is the president who has reached this position of great power is able to do things that are viewed as worthy of impeachment, well, that could be, a stain on the entire office. And I think that's kind of the issue. I guess Democrats, they don't like the fact that Trump became president, because it completely ruins their whole idea of the president as a noble office. And therefore, I can imagine it's almost like they don't want to prosecute him because that would almost be saying, yes, it's real. This was the president. The president was a terrible person, and we need to make him face the full extent of the law. It's almost, the analogy I can think of it's like not wanting to go to the doctors to get a bump checked out. It's like you kind of don't want to actually take the action to deal with it because you don't really want to acknowledge the problem is there. And that's kind of how I can view Democrats seeing the Trump presidency. Like, well, let's just try and ignore it, try not to deal with it.
Yeah.
Certainly, don't goodness me, do not engage in any systemic analysis of how we got to this position. That would be the worst thing you could do.
I think impeachment will be as far as it goes. Like, he can't run again, and that'll be that. And as for prosecuting Trump for the stuff he did when he was a private citizen and not the president, again, this is what many Democrats want to happen, but I think many Democratic donors kind of do this kind of shady stuff that Trump has been accused of. So I don't expect the Department of Justice to open that can of worms either. They may make an exception for Trump because, he'll be a clear exception to the rule since he's been impeached and all that, but the likelihood of him ending up in jail is very low on this as well. You consider how bad a precedent it would be for the Democratic donors if they have the government prosecuting powerful billionaires. I don't think that'll be a good idea for them. So, yeah, again, I don't expect Trump to go to jail for stuff he did before he was president either.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to be fair, they wouldn't want to prosecute him for things that he did before he was president, because that would be acknowledging that he was a bad guy even when he was elected. And of course, somebody like Trump being elected, that was just an aberration. And ultimately, yeah, I agree with your point that these people like Trump have all of this power in the first place. And maybe you could argue that the big crime of Trump was making the connection between being a corrupt grifter and having political power too obvious. I mean, we know that Trump has donated to the Democrats before, so there's probably lots of other Trumps out there who have donated to the Democrats as well, and obviously the Democrats aren't going to want to fall afoul of all those other Trumps out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about coronavirus, Michael. That's going to be our next prediction. And here's the thing. COVID, I think it'll ultimately stay with us, even though it's not 2020 anymore. What a shocker. We are, in fact, in lockdown for a third time in the UK, and I reckon around April things will turn back to normal. Normal is in the sense of what happened in the summer of 2020. And I don't think it will be until 2023, where we have a fully normal year and we finally, beat this thing. I don't expect there to be fans from other countries at the Olympics in Tokyo or at the Euros this summer. And also, I think we will probably need one more lockdown this winter as well. But here's my crucial prediction. I don't think we're going to get one since our vaccinations in the UK are actually looking good, which is a bit of a surprise, but there you go. And that will be used as an excuse. Like, we're vaccinating the population, we don't need another lockdown. And also, backbench Tory MPs are very unhappy with the lockdowns. They have said they're not happy with what Boris Johnson has been doing. I don't know why, I don't know how they can think this, but I guess they have deluded themselves into thinking that, they don't need lockdowns or they don't actually care about everyone dying. I mean, we had 1,600 COVID deaths just today in the UK. So who knows really? I mean, it really is the Conservative ideology question in a nutshell. Are they actually that stupid? Or do they actually not care and are just selfish? I'm not sure. But backbench Tory MPs, like I said, not very keen on another lockdown in the UK. And that's why I don't think we're going to have one. But we're probably, in next winter, probably going to need something similar to that. What do you think, Michael?
No, yeah. I mean, it's crazy, especially from the perspective of people who think that, like normal people, who think that the government's reaction to the virus has, in many cases, not gone far enough, to think that there are so many people out there who are angry with what the government even has done, which obviously, yeah. So I kind of agree with you that it's a big question of whether or not they're almost being kind of intentionally short-sighted, or, for malicious reasons, or they're actually just really stupid, which, you can't rule either out.
So yeah, that's COVID. I don't think we can expect any major changes soon, unfortunately, especially if Boris Johnson is still Prime Minister, Michael. And that's what we're going to talk about next, Boris Johnson. Now, my prediction for him is a big prediction. I think Boris Johnson will resign as Prime Minister by the end of the year. I do not expect Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister of the UK in 2022. He has royally messed up the COVID response, and soon people will start to quote-unquote notice holes in the Brexit deal he has got with the EU as well, which will inevitably lead to a slower economic recovery compared to the rest of Europe. He will be blamed for both COVID and Brexit, even though I'd argue the Conservative Party should take a lot of the blame alongside the UK's media, but Boris Johnson will be a useful scapegoat. They can toss him aside, they have no need for him. The narrative will be he was clearly a bit of a buffoon who was not up to the job, and it wasn't the Tories and the press who were almost equally as bad as him because of their inherent ideological beliefs. No, it was just Boris Johnson. At the moment, there is this air around Boris of, can't we just get rid of this guy, from I think a lot of right-wing UK journalists, and I think that'll eventually happen.
I always have felt that Boris Johnson, he feels like a textbook patsy, in that he does seem so stupid and buffoonish. And obviously, yes, he has taken over during this period where two terrible things happened, and I say happened passively. Obviously, in the one case, it was entirely the doing of the political class and the media, as you said, Brexit. In the other case, obviously, the Conservatives, as we covered in our last videos, people can probably check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. That the Conservatives really did botch the response to the coronavirus, so they have a significant amount of blame there. So in some sense, it's almost convenient these two things have converged around this candidate who is, like you say, a bit of an embarrassment for the Conservatives, and it is obviously strange because he has done well. I mean, he got the Conservatives like their first real majority in a very long time, and obviously that does suggest that he is to some extent electable. I mean, people literally did elect him, but obviously at the same time, you get the impression that Conservatives, they'd rather have somebody a bit more just normal in charge, you know. Boris Johnson, he does feel like he's from that Trump era of these weird, outlandish types. And yeah, I imagine the Conservatives would want to get someone else in charge. And of course, they're going to want to just get rid of the stench of this last year that's been as soon as possible. The only reason why I'm dubious that he might not end up leaving in 2021 is because I do feel like Conservatives have this brilliant shamelessness that allows them to stay in power way longer than they should. Do they just really go past their use by date?
But that's I'd say, Michael, that's the party though, not Boris Johnson specifically.
Yeah.
There was this poll that came out a few days ago, and it was big news in the UK media that Boris Johnson could even lose his seat.
I saw
if
that.
This poll was correct, which saw Labour leading the Conservatives by, I think, 4% or something. And so, yeah, there will be pressure on him. He will resign, I do think, even though, like you said, the Conservatives are pretty shameless. Well, this past couple of years have been pretty bad. If they could get their scapegoat out of the way and implement someone else in, that's how they remain in power. And the question then comes to, well, who will replace him? Let's go through a couple of the candidates. Priti Patel, she's making a run for it, trying to deport every brown or black person who even has a parking ticket, which will surely play well to the Conservative base. There's also Michael Gove as well, but nobody really likes him, although he's got a lot of friends in the media. No. But I reckon it will be Rishi Sunak who will be our new PM. I think Rishi Sunak would probably be almost the perfect Conservative leader. He is a Brexit-supporting social conservative, but he is also a believer in austerity and limited government. There's this great clip of him. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but he basically says this line, which is, the government isn't just some entity that has its own money, which is completely untrue, because that's what the government is. It's this entity which has its own money. Like this whole thing about, well, the government doesn't really have a lot of money. We don't want to max out our national credit card. All of that stuff, which he was saying a few weeks ago. And yeah, that's why I think he would be a perfect Conservative leader. Also, you can't say the Conservatives are racist if their leader is a brown guy, who's got Asian heritage. I mean, his skin colour not being a barrier to his success is something that he does like to point out in interviews that he does. Like Rishi Sunak, that is something he hangs his hat on, the fact that he's brown and look how much success he's had. So that proves that racism isn't really a problem, and he points that out, which of course is another thing that the Conservatives will like. Yeah, see, we're not really a racist country. Look, Rishi Sunak is Prime Minister. So yeah, I think he's going to be a really perfect leader for the Conservatives. I am not looking forward to the inevitable day, in my opinion, he walks into number 10. But yeah, that's who I think will be our Prime Minister by the end of this year. What do you think, Michael?
Well, as you could tell by my enthusiastic yes, that wasn't enthusiasm for Rishi Sunak's leadership, but it was because I 100% agree with you that Rishi Sunak, I mean, I remember people talking about him as leader as soon as he mentioned his brilliant Eat Out to Help Out scheme. People were saying, oh yeah, he kind of feels like he'll be a leader. And obviously there is definitely that identity politics aspect of, not just you can't call us racist because he's brown, but also the aspect you brought up of it means that they can deny institutional problems by having these successful people who come from backgrounds that are generally viewed to be disadvantaged in the UK. I do have to say I'm very enthusiastic about this continuing this tradition of the Conservatives accidentally being more diverse in their leadership than Labour. We've had our first 2 women PMs under the Conservatives. Meanwhile, Labour's never had a female leader. And now we're going to get our first South Asian Prime Minister under the Conservatives.
So yeah, Michael, that's Rishi Sunak, our potential new Prime Minister. If it's not this year, I reckon it will be before the next general election. I am absolutely assured of that. I just think Boris Johnson, his time is running out. So it will be in the next few months he steps down. But let's move on to someone who I think might not even be challenging Rishi Sunak in the 2024 general election, Keir Starmer, the current leader of the opposition. Now, here's the thing with Keir Starmer. I think he is completely out of his depth. I mean, I don't like him, but here's the issue. I do think most of the right wing of the Labour Party are basically a bunch of fucking idiots whose only concern is if they don't get an angry headline written about them in the Daily Mail. Keir Starmer has no charisma. The interviews he gives are just incredibly pathetic, and also he has no good political instincts either, like the whole right wing of the Labour Party in general. Now, currently the press like Keir Starmer because he has shown he cares about what they think, particularly as Johnson is opposite him at the moment. They haven't been too hard on him, but especially if I think Sunak becomes leader, Starmer's painfully obvious flaws will be exposed and he will receive a battering. I really don't think that he's a good leader. He looks good in a suit, he's got a nice haircut, he looks, quote unquote, looks prime ministerial, but I think once people get to know him, as I have got to know him over these last few months, I don't think people will be impressed. They cannot be impressed by him. I refuse to believe it. And why I said before he might not even be Labour leader, well, he probably will be, but there's a chance that he's just so bad that the Labour right are like, right, let's get someone else in. He's clearly not up to it. But yeah, that's my very harsh take on Keir Starmer, but I think it's the correct one. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I really don't know if I could see him. I mean, I would expect that he'll at least have to end up running an election and losing an election, and I do think that he would lose an election. I think there's no way, especially up against Rishi Sunak. Obviously, we don't like him, but I think ultimately Rishi Sunak, he does seem to have more charisma and a clearer idea of what he's about. I think Labour in general are just screwed, and I'm not even going to go into why because I think that would be too much of a topic for this video, but I definitely think that Keir Starmer, considering the situation Labour's in, and there's so much going on with Labour right now, it's a complete mess, they would need a pretty good leader to navigate the minefield they're in of all these weird accusations from the press, and then at the same time they're doing all this dodgy stuff, there's all this factional stuff. It's a complete nightmare. And obviously Keir Starmer is not even close to being able to win. And to be honest, when I did see that article that you already mentioned about how if there was an election tomorrow, the Conservatives would lose, I was honestly surprised because I thought that, wow. But yeah, I agree with you that opinion of Keir Starmer would surely have to, I don't see it ever getting better. I mean, that's the kind of thing, I don't necessarily see it getting much worse, but I just think ultimately Labour's going to be constantly straggling behind. That's kind of my prediction, which is slightly less harsh than yours, but it's what I think. They're just going to be constantly just stagnating for the whole year, and people are not going to know what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think stagnation is a real possibility. I just think, I don't think Keir Starmer is a good leader. I mean, the thing is, Jeremy Corbyn, I don't think had that much political nous, but at least he has principles. I don't think Keir Starmer has any of that. And again, I think we've seen his poll numbers dip more and more as the months have gone on. I think that'll continue, and then there will be a narrative around him that he's just not that good at the end of the day. So yeah, that's why I think maybe I just don't like him. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but there you go. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening to our 2021 predictions. As you can tell, we aren't that optimistic, and I think, Michael, it's fair to say that the old adage will be true for this year. Things will stay the same, just get a bit worse. What do you think?
Same shit, different day.